Hey guys, tonight we travel not through wars or politics, but through the smoky kitchens and perfumed chambers of ancient Rome. You sit down on a rough-cut stone bench, surrounded by brass pots bubbling over open flames. A faint aroma of sage and something more, burnt, tickles your nose. Nearby, a woman dabs soot into a wooden bowl while muttering about Venus, the goddess of beauty. Her fingers are stained. Her cat, uninterested, walks over your lap and flops down. You're about to discover how seriously Romans took their hair. Spoiler alert, very seriously. In a world without selfies, strands of dyed hair did the heavy lifting. And if you're thinking, hey, this sounds kind of relaxing, don't get too cozy just yet. Some of the stuff they use? Well, let's just say you definitely wouldn't find it on the shelf at your local salon unless your stylist specializes in early empire chic and light ammonia trauma. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past a noisy Roman street vendor who's hawking everything from wool tunics to suspiciously herbal-smelling hair dye. A crowd gathers around the stall, where a brazier heats a mixture of wine sediment, charcoal, and the crushed roots of some poor unknown plant. This is the Roman answer to going brunette, or trying to, anyway. Most results turned out more muddy surprise than mahogany goddess. Back in your Insula apartment, a charming 5-story fire hazard, you prepare your own dye concoction in a chipped amphora. This evening, it's soot and crushed sage leaves boiled in goat fat. The recipe came from your aunt, who swore it made her irresistible to a baker once, although historians still argue whether he just liked the free samples. You massage the warm mixture into your scalp, trying not to think about the lingering smell. Romans didn't have shampoo. They had rain, vinegar, and patience. Oh, and a tool called a strigil, which was like trying to exfoliate with a butter knife. You wait under a cloth, wondering if anyone can smell you from the next floor. Across the city, a senator's wife does the same, except with imported myrrh, Syrian saffron, and a slave girl fanning her with a palm frond. Hair dye, like everything else in Rome, was not just about style. It was about class, seduction, ritual, and mood. A well-dyed mane could say, I'm rich, I'm wild, I'm foreign, I'm fashionable, or, in some cases, I'm trying to annoy my mother-in-law. Roman poets loved to write about hair. Ovid in particular dished out beauty advice like a Bronze Age influencer. He recommended different styles for different face shapes and warned of trout mouths and short necks with the same casual cruelty as a YouTube comment section. But even Ovid knew, hair dye had its limits. Many Romans dyed their hair dark to cover gray. But some, especially courtesans, went the opposite way, bleaching their locks into a golden halo. Remember, this was a culture that both conquered Gaul and tried to copy its hairstyles. And then there was the matter of aging. Romans aged quickly. By your mid-30s, you were considered almost ancient. So when a man in his 40s dyed his hair black, he wasn't fooling anyone, he was just reminding the Senate he still mattered. The dye might burn. It might stink. But if it looked good under torchlight, worth it. You sit, your head wrapped in a linen cloth, and wait for the soot to work its magic. You think of all the Romans who did this before you, centurions, mistresses, maybe even emperors. You yawn. You smell like smoke. You wonder if anyone, centuries from now, will find strands of your hair in a clay jar and say, wow, someone really tried. You peel the linen wrap from your head. It's still damp, the smell of goat fat having transformed into something disturbingly metallic. You tilt your head toward the firelight and catch a glimpse of your reflection in a bowl of water. The results are, let's say, in progress. The soot's given you a kind of uneven raccoon effect, but hey, that's half the charm of ancient cosmetics. To perfect your look, you'd need help. And that's where the market stalls come in, the quiet little street corners and cluttered side shops filled with perfumes, oils, and yes, hair dyes. These places weren't fancy. They were more like chaotic Etsy pop-ups run by very intense women in tunics with ink-stained fingers and whispers full of mystery. You imagine one beckoning you over, then pulling aside a curtain to reveal a smoky backroom. Inside, pots bubbling over coals, bundles of dried herbs, even a few small amphorae labeled in a hurried, slanted Latin hand. Roman vendors guarded their recipes like treasure. Some were passed down from mother to daughter, others scrawled on wax tablets and hidden inside old sandals. Historians still argue whether these mixtures were entirely herbal or if people just casually tossed in crushed beetles, stale wine, and the occasional unlucky fish. You're inclined to believe the weirder theories. The Romans were nothing if not experimental. You examine one recipe passed on to you in a whispered exchange near the baths of Caracalla. It includes ingredients like green vitriol, vinegar, fig sap, and moon-charged water, which, translated, means water left outside overnight in a dish made of bronze. Was it science? Was it superstition? Maybe both. Maybe neither. That's Rome for you. One particularly enterprising vendor offers you a tiny vial of something she calls Eros Caress. It claims to make your hair shimmer like the sun and smell faintly of figs. You uncork it and immediately recoil. The scent is less fig, more wet scrolls. You ask what's in it, and she leans in, whispering, only what Venus allows. Suspicious. But you buy it anyway because, well, it's ancient Rome and your options are limited. At home, you blend the mysterious potion with oil, apply it cautiously, and wait. You wonder if it's really hair dye, or if you've just joined a secret cult by accident. Could be both. A week later, your neighbor claims your hair now glows under moonlight. She also says you owe her a chicken. You're not sure how those are connected. You head back out for more supplies, and as you do, you notice something peculiar. How many people are doing the same thing? Hair dye isn't just a trend. It's an obsession. You pass a young man examining a strand of someone else's hair and muttering about sandalwood content. You hear an old woman complaining loudly about a dye that turned her scalp blue. The stalls are alive with debate. Is henna better than saffron? Should you pre-wash with vinegar? Is it true that the emperor's mistress uses a snail slime rinse? Historians still argue whether these rumors were deliberately spread by sellers to drum up business or if the Roman public was just chronically dramatic. You lean toward the latter. After all, these are people who built marble arches just to say, look what I did. As the sun sets and the torches along the streets flicker on, you make your way home. The dye is drying now, stiff but less smelly. You lie back, imagining the secrets stored in every curl and coil of dyed Roman hair. Stories of courtship, betrayal, ambition, and vanity, all hidden in plain sight, swirling beneath an uneven rinse of soot and vinegar. You wake to sunlight warming the plaster wall beside your bed, your hair stiff as a dried date. You sit up slowly, pat the strands, crunchy. Like toast, but with identity issues. You shuffle to your basin and lean in. The light catches something unexpected. Your hair has developed a sort of bronze shimmer. Not quite blonde, not quite brunette. It's what a poetic Roman might call aureus dusk, what your upstairs neighbor calls honey rat. Either way, you've joined the ranks of the fashion forward. And in Rome, that means going blonde. Not just any blonde. Teutonic blonde. The kind worn by enslaved women from Northern Europe, gladiators' mistresses, and anyone trying to say I'm spicy, dangerous, and possibly bad with Latin grammar. You've heard the stories, how Roman women, especially those from the upper crust, went to elaborate lengths to lighten their locks. And not always subtly. They'd smear their hair with mixtures of wood ash, crushed eggshells, and fermented barley, then sit on rooftops in the baking sun, heads wrapped in cloths soaked in lemon or vinegar. Imagine a terrace of noble women sizzling like pastries while gossiping about toga colors and which senator was definitely wearing a wig. Historians still argue whether the obsession with blonde hair came from admiration or mockery of the northern tribes Rome conquered. Some say it was pure aesthetics. Others suggest it was more about dominance, taking what was foreign and making it fashionable. Either way, blonde became the ancient version of hot girl summer. The difference? Their bleach was literally made from ashes and urine. Yes, urine. A little known but very well utilized beauty ingredient in the Roman world. Imported human urine, preferably aged and fermented for a few days, became the secret weapon of the truly determined blonde. You learn this the hard way when a friend recommends Gallian gold, a dye that, upon closer inspection, smells exactly like a poorly maintained alley. You ask her what's in it. She just grins and says, authentic gall. You attempt the method anyway. For science. For history. For the likes. You apply the paste, wrap your head in cloth, and climb onto the roof with your neighbors. You squint into the sun and try not to breathe. Everyone's pretending this is normal. You try, too. After a while, you give up and head back inside, dripping slightly and unsure whether to feel glamorous or violated by chemistry. You rinse out the mixture using a jug of lukewarm water and hope the smell doesn't linger into Saturnalia. And the result? Honestly, kind of stunning. The sun's caught the dye just right. Your hair gleams with a hint of golden wheat and possibly mild regret. You walk the forum with your head high. You're not just anyone now. You're a Roman with purposefully altered keratin strands. You're making a statement. You're flirting with fashion and biology. People stare. Some nod approvingly. One man whistles, another trips over a dog while gawking. Is it the hair? Is it the confidence? Is it just Rome being chaotic? Doesn't matter. You've tapped into something ancient and powerful. Blonde may not be natural to you, but in this city, natural is for people without ambition. You now belong to the elite crowd who understands that the right color at the right time could unlock doors, hearts, or at least better market stall prices. The dye fades slowly over days. You reapply. You adjust. You learn that maintaining blonde is a full-time job, even in a society without clocks. You share tips with strangers at the baths. You nod sagely when asked about ash-to-vinegar ratios. You're becoming a connoisseur. A hair historian in real time. All from a craving to stand out. To shine. To show you could be more than just another toga in the crowd. You wander back into your atrium one afternoon with your newly golden head held high, only to find your cousin crouched near the fire pit, stirring something in a copper pot with the intensity of a potion master. The smell hits you before you get close. It's pungent, sharp, eye-watering. You know immediately, urine. Don't knock it, she says, not even looking up. Cleopatra used it. You raise a brow. Cleopatra was Egyptian, not Roman, but in this house, historical facts are just seasoning for the drama. Still, she has a point. Aged urine, called lodium, was a staple of Roman hair treatments. Collected in jars and amphorae, usually from public urinals, it was fermented and then mixed into bleaching agents. The ammonia softened the hair cuticle, allowing other ingredients to penetrate and lighten the strands. Disgusting? Yes. Effective? Also yes. You back away slowly as she hums to herself and tosses in some crushed iris root. She calls it sun milk. You call it evidence. You escape the house and head for the local tonsure, the Roman equivalent of a salon, barbershop, and social club rolled into one. Inside, it's chaos. Men argue over football, well, chariot teams, women recline while attendants rub oils into their scalps, and a half-bald man shouts about someone stealing his henna. It's oddly comforting. You settle into a stool, and a wiry old man named Penna offers to refresh your crown. You agree. He mutters about your roots and disappears behind a curtain. When he returns, he holds a small pot filled with something between paste and pudding. You try not to flinch as he slathers it on. As he works, he shares stories. Stories of noble women who demanded that their hair resemble honey, or wheat, or clouds at dusk. Of men who secretly dyed their beards at night and pretended it grew in black. Of one emperor, he won't say who once ordered his guards to search the city for that specific shade of Thracian flax. Historians still argue whether that story refers to Emperor Commodus or just a very picky senator. Either way, it confirms what you already know. Hair dye wasn't just beauty. It was theater. Politics. Alchemy. After an hour, Pinna declares you've done enough. You examine your hair in a polished bronze mirror. It's shiny. It's smooth. It smells faintly of olives and whatever Pinna sprinkled in when you weren't looking. You tip him a denarius and make your way back through the forum, catching admiring glances along the way. One woman asks what you use. You pause, then smile and say, trade secret. At dinner, your cousin reappears with her head wrapped in cloth and confidence. Her hair is lighter, true, but also patchy. Some spots golden, others greenish. You both pretend not to notice. She pours wine and says she feels powerful. And in a way, she is. The Romans didn't just dye hair for vanity. They did it for transformation, for ritual, for rebellion. Blonde could mean status. Dark hair could mean mystery. A sudden change in shade could announce mourning, or readiness to wed, or a new lover, or a new era. You look at the brazier still glowing in the corner. The soot, the jars, the endless mix of art and science. You realize that behind every head of hair walking past you in the street is a recipe, a story, a little madness, and a lot of dedication. You head to bed with your scalp tingling and your pillows slightly stained. And for once, you don't mind. You're part of something ancient now. Messy, fragrant, alchemical. You close your eyes and smile. You wake before sunrise to the soft clang of amphora lids and the sleepy murmurs of neighbors fetching water. The air is cool and faintly smoky. You rise slowly, mindful of your pillow, thankfully not too ruined by last night's hair rituals, and stretch toward the clay jug by the window. Time for the morning rinse. The water's cold, sharp enough to shock you fully awake. You tilt your head and pour, letting the mix of oil and residue from yesterday swirl down the basin's grooves. The effect? Not bad. In fact, under the early light, your hair shines with a subtle golden tint. The ends catch fire when the sun hits them just right. It's enough to make you pause and smile. You slip on your sandals and head to the courtyard. The older woman next door, Unia, is already there, fussing with a kettle and muttering at a boy who's meant to be grinding sage. You greet her, and she raises an eyebrow. You've been dying again. It's not a question. You nod. She squints at you, then gestures for you to sit. Come. Let me show you how we did it before all these imported fads. You obey, and she begins her process. She starts with boiling rosemary, laurel, and a little alum. No dyes, no colors, just shine and strength. But then comes the chant. Low and rhythmic, words mumbled more for memory than magic. She traces a symbol into the steam rising from the bowl. For Venus, she explains. And Fortuna, just in case. Historians still argue whether Roman women genuinely believed in the magical efficacy of these chants, or if they were more like habit, like humming to yourself while doing laundry. Either way, the air shifts slightly. It feels sacred, or maybe just nostalgic. You help her apply the mixture to her long gray hair. She doesn't try to change the color. Just preserve what's left. There's honor in age, she says. But shine? That's always in style. Later that night, you watch your neighbor up on her roof, sitting beneath the moon with her damp hair wrapped in linen, whispering softly to the stars. You can't hear what she says, but her face is calm, and her eyes are closed. You feel like an intruder and slip away. Back in your own chamber, you try a version of her ritual. You light a small lamp, crush a bit of rosemary between your fingers, and dip it into oil. You whisper, not quite a prayer, not quite nonsense, and rub it gently into your scalp. Somewhere between gesture and intention, something settles. A sense of peace, maybe. Or just the comfort of doing what countless others have done for centuries, staining time into strands of hair, making beauty from ashes and herbs. You lie down with the faint scent of laurel on your skin. Outside, the city is quiet, for once. No vendors shouting. No sandals clapping. Only the creak of wood and the occasional coo of a pigeon. You drift into sleep knowing your head is wrapped in something ancient, not just a cloth, but a ritual, a rhythm, and a tiny act of defiance against the forgetfulness of time. You wake to a knock on the door. It's a girl with wide eyes and a basket of grape leaves. She says nothing, only points at your hair and grins. Then she holds up a small clay jar. From Demisha, she whispers. You blink, confused, until you remember, Demisha, the freed woman from across the alley who once complimented your sun-burnished look. Apparently, she's decided to share her secret. Inside the jar is a thick, reddish paste. Smells like sandalwood, wine, and something faintly metallic. You touch it. Smooth. Cool. When you dab a bit on your wrist, it stains quickly, a deep, rusty orange. Henna. Imported, expensive, and increasingly fashionable among Rome's eclectic elite. Demisha waves from her balcony, her hair tied in ribbons and already beginning to glow with a copper sheen. You nod in thanks, then turn back inside, already imagining the possibilities. A redhead in the forum? Risky. Daring. Delicious. As you apply the dye, you think of the strange network you've joined. Women who trade not just recipes, but wisdom. You've met stylists who began as slaves, beauticians who charge in whispers, and herbalists who insist the goddess Flora speaks through lavender. There's no central salon. Just backrooms, kitchens, stairwells, spaces where transformation brews in silence. Historians still debate whether these beauty rituals were acts of rebellion or assimilation. On one hand, Roman society demanded women remain proper, modest, and visibly Roman. On the other hand, it rewarded allure, surprise, and novelty. So what happens when a senator's wife shows up at a feast with flaming red hair? Does she scandalize or mesmerize? You suspect both. Demisha certainly has. She tells you, Days later, over a shared bowl of figs, that her new hair helped her close a deal with a merchant from Corinth. He said I looked like fire, she says with a wink. And then he gave me a better price on linens. Not everyone is charmed. At the baths, an older matron wrinkles her nose and mutters about Eastern influences. She doesn't say it to your face, but you hear her. And Demisha does too. Her chin lifts. Let them gossip, she says. They're just afraid we'll shine too brightly. You notice that these women, once scattered and solitary, are starting to meet more openly. Sharing henna, offering advice, debating whether rosemary or myrrh makes for a better after-rinse. There's laughter now. Less secrecy. One night, as the sky deepens into indigo and the lamps are lit, you gather in someone's courtyard. A dozen of you. The air is thick with smoke and the scent of lemon oil. You die together. You joke. Someone sings. Someone spills dye down her tunic and doesn't even care. It feels like power. Quiet, sticky-fingered, slightly sour-smelling power. A sisterhood forged in burnt herbs and stained fingertips. You lie in bed that night with henna damp hair fanned out around your head like a lion's mane. You dream of dancing in the forum, your hair catching every flicker of torchlight. And even though you'll wash most of it out by morning, the memory, like the color, lingers. You sit by the fire, a shallow bowl in your lap, and grind crushed walnuts into a thick, oily paste. Outside, a faint drizzle mists the terracotta rooftops. Rome feels quiet today, like it's watching. You smear the mixture into your hair with slow, practiced fingers. It smells earthy, nutty, slightly bitter, comforting in a way that only something hand-prepared can be. You're not trying to go darker this time. You're trying to repair. The constant bleaching, boiling, and coloring have taken their toll. Your ends feel like straw, and your scalp, well, let's just say your pillow now resembles a battlefield after every rinse. Today isn't about transformation. It's about restoration. And it's a reminder that in ancient Rome, even beauty had consequences. You've heard stories whispered at the baths, of women who died too often and went bald. Of merchants who sold quick-fix pastes that burned skin or made hair fall out in clumps. Of a senator's mistress who lost all her curls before a banquet and was seen wearing a mop of dyed wool. Historians still argue whether these tales were warnings or juicy gossip amplified by competitive matrons. But you've seen the damage firsthand. So you take it slow, letting the walnut oil sink in, massaging gently, the way Unia taught you. Your cousin drops by mid-morning with a new concoction. She claims it's an Egyptian formula, dates, honey, and finely ground turquoise. You eye it skeptically. Turquoise, you ask. For shimmer, she insists, as if that explains everything. She applies it to just one lock and sits in the corner, reading a scroll and looking deeply pleased with herself. The resulting streak is faintly blue. You pretend not to notice, and she pretends it was intentional. Later that day, you pass a vendor shouting about restorative balms for battle-damaged curls. You pause, tempted, until you spot a pigeon drinking from his rinse bucket. You keep walking. At home, you comb through your hair with a bronze pin, careful not to pull. Each strand feels softer, a little stronger. The shine is more natural now, not the gleam of dyed ambition, but the soft glow of patient care. It makes you think of your mother. She never dyed her hair. Said she didn't need to. Gray is a color too, she once said, combing her hair beside the window as the sun turned it silver. You hadn't understood her then. You thought she was just old-fashioned. Now, as you massage walnut oil into your scalp with slow, circular motions, you get it. The ritual is part of the beauty. Not the transformation, but the touch. The pause. The act of tending to yourself in a world that demands too much and praises too little. That evening, you and your cousin sit on the steps outside, hair damp and steaming from recent rinses. You say nothing. Just watch the city darken around you. The forum buzzes faintly in the distance. Somewhere, someone spills wine. Someone else sings a verse from Ovid. And you, with your slightly soot-streaked, walnut-softened hair, feel oddly whole. The morning mist rolls over the rooftops like a toga worn too loosely. You wrap your shawl tighter and make your way through the narrow alleys of the Sabura district, stepping carefully between puddles and yesterday's discarded fig skins. Today, you're visiting someone special, Livia, the woman people whisper about when they talk of perfect hair. She lives near the edge of the Aventine Hill, where the homes start to stretch a little wider and the air smells less like anchovies and more like fresh bread. Livia is old, but not frail. Her hair, though streaked with silver, seems to ripple like spun silk every time she moves. She opens the door before you knock. "I knew you'd come," she says, and you want to believe she means that in a mystical, oracle of Apollo sort of way. But she's holding a comb and a damp towel, so it's probably just habit. You sit beside the hearth while she prepares her blend. Olive oil warmed by the fire. Crushed lavender buds. A few strands of some moss green herb you don't recognize. She moves with precision, speaking little. When she finally applies the mixture to your scalp, her fingers move in slow circles, not just massaging but mapping. "You've been overdying," she says, matter of fact. "Too much sun. Too much vinegar. Your roots are whispering complaints." You stifle a laugh, not wanting to interrupt the spell. Historians still argue whether women like Livia were simply clever with ingredients or something more, healers, witches, chemists ahead of their time. Some even suspect women like her passed along coded knowledge through beauty rituals, preserving herbal lore beneath the veil of vanity. As your hair drinks in her concoction, you begin to feel drowsy. The warmth of the oil, the soft crackle of the fire, the way she hums under her breath, not a tune, exactly, just something old and rhythmically human. Later, as she rinses your hair with rainwater caught in a marble bowl, she tells you about the dye guilds, small, mostly secretive circles of women who meet monthly to trade recipes, experiment with color, and gently defy Rome's rigid social rules. She says she used to lead one. Before it became dangerous, she adds with a shrug. You don't ask what that means. You just nod, like you're already part of it. You leave her home with your head wrapped in soft wool, feeling like someone returning from a sacred site. Your hair smells of lavender and firewood. The wind plays with your damp strands as you pass a group of girls near the Temple of Vesta, their laughter bright and sharp. You catch a snippet of their conversation. Something about a senator's wife whose dye turned her scalp pink. They laugh harder. You smile, remembering when you once judged so quickly too. But now you know better. Now you understand that hair in Rome isn't just fashion. It's communication. A coded language of ambition, rebellion, ritual, and care. Each ingredient a word. Each ritual a sentence. Each glance, each scent, each shimmer, a message. At home, you catch your reflection in the bronze mirror. Your hair looks soft, not flashy, not performative, just clean, full, and rested. Like you. You don't go out that night. Instead, you sit by the window with a lamp and a plum, peeling it slowly while watching shadows play across the street. And even though no one sees you, you feel seen. You wake to a knock on the wooden shutters, light, hesitant, but persistent. You unlatch them and peek out. It's Faustus, the merchant's son from down the street, holding a scroll and looking sheepish. You know hair stuff, right? He mumbles. You blink, still half asleep. Depends who's asking. My uncle, he says, pushing the scroll into your hands. He wants to impress a widow from Baetica. She's very blonde. You stifle a grin, nod, and invite him in. Turns out, Faustus's uncle is pushing 50 and increasingly bald, with a desperate plan to regrow and dye what little he has into golden curls. He wants to look vigorous, Faustus explains, emphasizing the word like it might summon a miracle. You assure him you'll prepare something, say fish. You dig through your supply baskets, dried chamomile for lightning, a hint of crushed saffron if you're feeling fancy, and, of course, a pinch of ash for credibility. You wrap the bundle and send Faustus off with strict instructions. Mainly, do not apply it all at once and, under no circumstances, mix it with goat milk again. As he leaves, you chuckle. But you also feel a twinge of kinship. The men, for all their bravado, care just as much about appearances. They just pretend they don't. Case in point, the famous Caesar comb-over. Historians still argue whether Julius Caesar's love of laurel wreaths was more symbolic or simply a brilliant way to hide a receding hairline. But the truth is, he was obsessed with how he looked. And Romans noticed. There are entire poems written about baldness. Some mocking, some oddly reverent. One poet even declared bald men closer to the gods, because nothing grew on Olympus either. You take a walk near the baths later that afternoon, your scarf loose, hair catching the golden light. You pass a group of men in togas clustered around a stylus near a column base. They're arguing over beard dye. One man insists on charcoal mixed with myrrh. Another swears by ground shellfish for that ocean luster. You pause, pretending to study a mosaic, and eavesdrop. They say the general from Hispania uses a wig now. Nonsense. That's his real hair. Just enhanced. With what? Moonlight and a lie? The conversation drifts with the steam rising from the bathhouse, and you're struck by the absurd comfort of it all. Vanity isn't just a woman's sport in Rome. It's a citywide pastime. You head to a shaded portico and sit, watching the passers-by. You can often tell their ambitions by their hair. The dark, severe tones of the philosophers. The honeyed waves of the young elite. The poorly matched wigs of those trying too hard. Hair is a map of desire, fear, status. You run your fingers through your own. Still soft from yesterday's lavender oil. No big declarations. Just ease. That night, your cousin bursts in with news. The widow from Baetica invited Faustus as uncle to dinner. The dye worked. Sort of. His hair is more orange than gold, but apparently, she found it fiery. You both laugh until tears stream down your faces. And as you dry your eyes, you realize, Rome may burn, collapse, rebuild. But someone, somewhere, will always be mixing up a little magic in a bowl, hoping to turn back time, one strand at a time. It starts with a whisper, barely audible over the chatter of the forum. Did you see her hair? One woman says, fanning herself with a palm leaf. It's purple. The word hangs in the air like incense, heavy and curious. You follow the sound of scandal to its source, a senator's wife gliding down the marble steps of the Basilica Julia, chin high, curls bouncing like ripe plums. It isn't a trick of the light. Her hair is unmistakably purple, not the soft plum of aged wine, but bold, imperial, unapologetic. You stare, as does everyone else. Reactions flutter through the crowd like startled birds, shock, admiration, disapproval. A few people clap. One man trips over his own sandal. Historians still argue whether this was an act of protest, art, or accidental over dye. But the consequences were immediate. Gossip spread faster than any official decree. Within hours, people were quoting Ovid with fresh venom. Too much purple spoils the robe, one wag declared, adapting a line that originally had nothing to do with hair at all. Back at your insula, you and your cousin can barely contain your glee. What was she thinking? She asks, eyes wide. You pretend to have no opinion, but secretly, you're impressed. Purple dye, especially the real kind, made from Murex sea snails, was rare, eye-wateringly expensive, and usually reserved for senators' sashes and imperial trim. Using it for hair? That's like painting your kitchen with liquid gold and not telling your husband. You try to imagine the scene in her courtyard that morning, slaves stirring thick vats of shellfish extract, the pungent stench barely masked with rose water, the woman herself inspecting a single strand of hair under the rising sun. Bold doesn't even begin to cover it. Later that day, you hear that her husband, mortified, stormed into a public hearing and demanded new grooming laws. Decency in dyeing, he thundered, as if the republic itself hung in the balance. You picture him pacing furiously in his sandals, waving a scroll, all while his wife reclines on a litter, her hair catching sunlight like polished amethyst. The Senate debates the matter seriously. New rules are proposed. Fines. Bans. Even mandatory inspections at bathhouses. All because of a hair color. You sigh, stir a pot of basil and mint rinse, and wonder how many other women are quietly mixing up batches of their own rule-breaking concoctions right now. Purple might be banned tomorrow, but today, it's legend. That evening, you walk by the baker's wife, whose hair is suspiciously lilac-tinted. She nods at you, unbothered. Red cabbage and vinegar, she whispers. Not as dramatic, but the message is there. You smile and keep walking, realizing that dye isn't just fashion anymore. It's protest. It's poetry. It's power, distilled, emulsified, and massaged directly into the scalp. And that power? It's contagious. By nightfall, the forum buzzes with rumors of copycats, rebels, artists, and scandal. One woman shows up at a gathering with streaks of sea green. A dancer from the outskirts arrives wearing peacock feathers and hair dyed to match. Rome itself is beginning to shimmer, just slightly, with strange new colors. The lines between style and message blur until they vanish entirely. And you, with your walnut oil roots and rooftop rituals, are no longer just part of the conversation. You're part of the movement. You wake to a knock on the shutters, again. This time, it's not Faustus or a scroll-bearer, but a girl you barely know from 2 streets over, her cheeks flushed and her braid half undone. Are you the one who made the sea green dye? You blink at her, still in your tunic. No. But you know who did? You pause. Then you smile. Come in. She steps across the threshold like someone crossing into a shrine. And in a way, she is. Your home, once just a place of boiling herbs and stained towels, has slowly transformed. Now there are drying racks made of reeds, jars labeled in smudged charcoal, and a warm smell of rosemary and ambition in the air. You didn't mean to become a go-to. You just never stopped experimenting. As the girl sits, you study her face. She's nervous. Not about the dye, about the reason for it. You know that look. The one that says, I need this. Not for fun. For courage. You go to your corner shelf and pull out a little vial. Inside, a shimmer of blue made from crushed berries, fig sap, and just enough ash to anchor it. It won't last more than 2 days, you tell her gently. But that's long enough to say something important. She nods and grips it like it's a sword. Historians still debate how much autonomy Roman women really had. Officially, not much. But between the cracks, in the kitchens, at the markets, in the dye bowls, there was space for quiet rebellion. Hair color became their graffiti, their poetry, their battlefield. Later that afternoon, you see her walking through the forum with her head held high, streaks of blue curling at her temples. Her father, apparently, had arranged a marriage she didn't want. She wasn't protesting with screams. She was doing it with style. And suddenly, you notice others. A shopkeeper with violet curls pinned into an elaborate twist. A boy near the aqueducts whose beard has a streak of gold. A musician playing near the temple with locks dipped in crimson, the color of late summer figs. You don't know all their stories, but you understand them. By now, word has reached the authorities. You hear murmurs of a new law, something about excessive follicular creativity. Even the phrase sounds silly, like a bad translation of fear. They're worried, you realize. Not because of dye itself, but because of what it means. Choice. Voice. Change. You pass a wall near the baths covered in graffiti. One phrase stands out. The die is cast. You laugh aloud. A clever twist on Caesar's famous line. You wonder if he'd be proud or horrified. That night, your cousin tells you someone spotted a priestess of Vesta with silver-streaked braids. Sacred hair, dyed. The city's tilting, shifting, not wildly, not yet, but enough to feel it under your feet. Back home, you mix a new batch, this one with bay leaves and pomegranate skin. You're not sure what color it'll be. But that's the point now. Discovery. Play. Defiance, maybe. You dip your fingers into the bowl and breathe in deeply. The revolution doesn't need trumpets. Just a good rinse and someone willing to apply it. The morning haze clings low over the rooftops, as if even the clouds are pausing to see what color Rome's hair will be today. You step out onto the terrace with your own scalp still damp, a rich burgundy from last night's beetroot amber mixture. It's bold, sure, but after the senator's wife's purple stunt, bold is just Tuesday. Down below, a crowd gathers outside the Temple of Venus. At first, you think it's another protest. But no, the crowd is silent. Reverent. Draped in their best tunics, they form a slow procession toward the altar steps. Women and men alike, hair gleaming with strange hues under the morning sun. As you watch, one woman kneels and offers a lock of her newly dyed hair, brilliant emerald green, placing it in a silver bowl. She presses her forehead to the stone and whispers a prayer. You recognize the act instantly. A votive offering. You didn't think it had reached the temples. Historians still argue whether hair offerings were common or symbolic, spontaneous or institutionalized. But here it is, an act of beauty doubling as devotion. A curl of colored hair replacing incense or coin. Color not as vanity, but as vow. You head toward the temple slowly, unsure if you're a spectator or a participant. Along the way, you pass others doing the same. A teenage boy with streaks of marigold yellow. A widow with silver pale ends. A merchant's wife cradling her child, both with matching auburn braids. Each shade a sentence, a syllable in some ancient language Rome is only now remembering how to speak. Inside the temple, the air is thick with myrrh and rose oil. The floor gleams with polished marble, and the priestesses, serene, composed, stand near a basin collecting strands. No one is mocking. No one is scoffing. Here, dye is sacred. You find yourself stepping forward, fingers trembling as you reach up and pluck one dyed strand from your head. It's still warm. Still alive. You place it in the bowl and breathe deeply. Not all dye is about rebellion. Some is about remembrance. About transformation. About marking the passage from oneself into another. Later, outside the temple, you sit with a few others. A baker's daughter plays with a lock of her violet-dyed fringe. An old man with crimson at his temples hums an old tune. A girl next to you leans over and says, "I did mine for my mother. She never got to dye hers." You nod. You don't ask questions. You just sit. Back home, you stare at your reflection. Not just at the color, though it shimmers beautifully in the afternoon light. You look at your eyes, your expression, your breath. You've changed. Slowly. Like cloth steeped in dye, you've absorbed more than just color. You're no longer the person who used soot and goat fat just to keep up appearances. You've become something else entirely, a curator of memory, a caretaker of expression, a priestess in your own humble sanctuary of pots and paste. And tomorrow? Maybe green, maybe black, maybe no dye at all. Because now you know the secret. The color doesn't make the power. You do. The street outside your window is louder than usual. You peek through the wooden slats just in time to see a cart trundle by, piled high with wigs. Yes, wigs, big ones, curly ones, blonde ones, red ones, even one with little bronze beads tied to the ends like ceremonial bells. The cart driver is shouting, fresh from Alexandria. Guaranteed glamour. No lice, which seems like both a promise and a confession. You throw on your sandals and head down, curiosity outweighing caution. The vendor is surrounded already, mostly by women, though a few men linger at the edges pretending to admire the cartwheels. The wigs are astonishing. Real hair, dyed in every color the empire can muster, some natural, some less so. You pick up a piece. The curls are soft, dyed the color of ripe figs, and still faintly scented of jasmine oil. A girl beside you sighs, "That's the one Agrippina wore at the races last week." You can't tell if it's fact or fanfiction, but you're not about to ruin the moment. Wigs in Rome aren't new, of course. They've been imported from Germania, Egypt, and beyond for decades. But the dyed ones, those are growing in popularity fast. Especially among the elite who can't risk frying their real hair with harsh bleaches or acids. Historians still debate whether wigs were worn as status symbols or as cover-ups for unfortunate dye mishaps. Probably both. But what's certain is that wig makers were quietly becoming artists, chemists, and illusionists. At the market, you watch a woman with fine gray hair tuck it under a crimson wig with practiced ease. The change is instant. She stands taller, chin lifted, eyes scanning the crowd not with insecurity but with cool curiosity. Hair doesn't just change how you're seen, it changes how you see. You try on a few yourself. One's too tight. One makes you look like a senator's second wife in a midlife crisis. One, soft, auburn, just a touch wild, makes you gasp. You don't buy it, but you carry the feeling with you all day. Later, at the baths, you overhear two girls discussing wig etiquette. Is it lying, one asks, if everyone knows it's a wig? The other shrugs. We lie with perfume. We lie with shoes. Why not with hair? You think about that as you soak. You think about the truth you tell every time you dye, rinse, or wrap your hair. You think about the lies too. The ones that make you feel braver, prettier, different. Maybe it's not about truth or lies. Maybe it's about the story you need to wear today. At home, you find your cousin standing before the mirror, pinning on a honey blonde wig. Her real hair is twisted beneath a silk wrap. She looks radiant. You say nothing. She turns, catches your eye, and says, "I don't want to be me tonight." You nod. Then don't. You both walk out together, heads high, stories woven into every strand, real, fake, painted, powdered. It doesn't matter. Rome sees what you choose to show. And tonight? You choose fire. The tavern is loud, too loud for this early in the evening, but the energy feels charged, electric, the kind that coils around your ankles and pulls you deeper into the crowd. You're only here for figs and gossip, but as you slide into the corner bench, something catches your eye. At the far table, beneath a flickering oil lamp, sits a young woman with hair the color of crushed roses. Not red, not auburn, rose. It clings to her scalp like silk, glistens like something you should only wear to a funeral or a wedding, depending on your mood. Her fingers trace the rim of her wine cup. She's alone, but not unnoticed. Beside her sits a man, balding, bearded, trying too hard not to look at her. You can tell. You've seen it before. A few hesitant words, a shared laugh, and then she leans forward. You catch the shimmer of something tucked beneath her braid. A lock of his hair. Dyed. Braided in with hers. You blink. It's subtle, hidden beneath the rose curls. But it's there, faint, tawny, and unmistakably his. Historians still argue whether love charms involving hair were genuine magical rites or merely excuses for flirtation. But the traditions existed. Locks of hair tied together, hidden in sachets, burned with incense, or, like this, braided secretly into another's. It's romantic. It's eerie. It's Rome. You've heard of these rituals, whispered among market stalls and bathhouse corners. Add a drop of rose oil, a sprig of wormwood, a single strand of his hair. Bury it beneath your bed. Braid it into your locks. Sleep with your head facing the west. If the gods are merciful, he'll dream of you. You sip your wine slowly, amused. You didn't expect to see old magic in a cheap tavern. Later that night, you find yourself back at your own hearth, a pot of saffron and cloves simmering on the coals. Not for dye. For something else. A memory. A man with dark lashes and a crooked grin. You reach into your linen pouch and draw out a single strand of hair, his. You don't remember keeping it, but there it is, tucked beside a fig leaf and a folded prayer. You don't braid it into your hair. You're not that sentimental. But you dip it in the saffron oil and let it burn slowly in the flame. Just to see what dreams come. The next morning, the city feels quieter. Or maybe you do. You walk past the Temple of Fortuna, past vendors calling out the usual blend of lies and perfumes. A child runs past you, laughing, hair dyed green at the ends. You smile. A boy with a charm of his own. Back home, your cousin is trying something new. Marjoram and pomegranate, she says. For luck. She doesn't say what kind. You don't ask. You just pass her the comb. In Rome, dye is more than dye. It's desire. It's memory. It's magic, thin as smoke, strong as scent. Some of it's for love. Some of it's for forgetting. And some of it is for those nights when you need a little spell to remember who you are. The sky over Rome is moody today, gray with a hint of thunder, like Jupiter is brooding about something minor but refuses to let it go. You're tucked under the stone awning of a perfume vendor's stall, watching the rain streak down clay tiles and darken the edges of everyone's tunics. That's when you hear it, a new edict being read aloud in the forum. By order of the Senate, the orator proclaims, citizens are hereby prohibited from displaying unnatural hair colors in sacred precincts, official processions, or public ceremonies, lest they offend the dignity of Roman tradition. The crowd reacts exactly as you'd expect, gasps, eye rolls, smirks. Someone drops a figure. Someone else laughs so hard they choke on their date pastry. You lean against a pillar, fingers still stained with last night's batch of mulberry paste, and wonder how they plan to enforce it. A color inspector? A scalp tribunal? Historians still argue whether these kinds of laws were ever truly enforced or just symbolic swings at the windmills of fashion. Most likely, they were desperate attempts to preserve the illusion of control. You return home to find your cousin furious. They're banning dye at weddings now, she hisses. As if I want to walk down the aisle looking like a plucked chicken just to honor the gods. Her indignation is half genuine, half gleeful rebellion. We should throw a party. A protest. Diane. You raise an eyebrow. A Diane? She nods. Everyone shows up wearing their wildest shades. We sit silently. Beautifully. Like a garden. Let them try to punish that. By sunset, the idea has already caught fire. Not literally, this isn't Nero's time. But word spreads fast. You hear whispers at the bathhouse, see smirks in the market. Even the perfumer drops a note in your palm as you pass, marigold extract, for your statement piece. The day of the protest arrives with golden light and nervous excitement. You gather at the edge of the forum, not in banners or slogans, but in color. Stripes of cerulean, coils of saffron gold, braids of lavender and bronze. It's breathtaking. It's absurd. It's utterly Roman. You take your place, seated with dignity beside a fruit vendor and a midwife with mint green highlights. No one speaks. Not a sound. Just the faint rustle of wind and the distant clatter of carts. A senator walks by, slows, stares. Says nothing. His mouth twitches slightly. Is that admiration? You sit for an hour. Then two. No arrests. No speeches. Just presence. Later, back at home, Your cousin beams. We weren't ignored. No, you agree, rinsing mulberry from your hands. We were impossible to ignore. And that, perhaps, is the secret. Rome loves order, but it worships spectacle. And your dye protest? It was both. You sit on the windowsill, looking out across the rooftops. Somewhere, someone is boiling flower petals. Somewhere, someone is whispering a recipe into a daughter's ear. Somewhere, another law is being drafted, and just as quickly, being mocked. Hair dye in Rome isn't going anywhere. Because law can't touch what's in the heart. And the heart? The heart longs to shine. Rain taps lightly against the roof tiles as you sit cross-legged by the hearth, sorting bundles of dried herbs. Your fingers move automatically, lavender for scent, sage for scalp, rosemary for resilience. But today, you're focused not on smell or shimmer, but symbolism. Because in Rome, hair color is no longer just fashion or defiance. It's a kind of language, coded and layered, loaded with meaning. And lately, you've begun to notice the patterns. A woman at the baths wearing the soft gold of chamomile? Newly engaged. A girl outside the bakery with streaks of deep berry? Recently widowed, but not for long if those glances mean anything. An older man with pitch-black roots and sun-bleached ends? A retiree pretending to still be in politics. Bless him. Historians still argue whether hair color in Rome was intentionally communicative or just culturally interpreted that way over time. But living it? You can feel the subtext humming under every glance. Color speaks. Your cousin, sprawled nearby reading a scroll of Catullus, suddenly asks, "Do you think people judge us by our hair?" You don't even look up. Only always. She rolls over. Then I hope they enjoy their judgments, because I'm doing violet next. You smirk. Statement of power? Statement of being bored. And that's the thing. Not all dye is message. Sometimes it's mood. Sometimes it's a shrug in pigment form. You think back to your first dye, soot and goat fat, a nervous attempt to look less tired, more seen. You've come a long way. Now, your mixtures are balanced, intentional, fragrant. You make color decisions like a general choosing a battle strategy. Or a poet crafting her favorite line. This week's batch? Something gentle. A dusk-tone blend with lilac and olive leaf. A reminder that transformation doesn't have to shout. It can whisper. Linger. Hunt. Out in the city, you begin to notice even more nuance. The women near the temple of Juno wear ash-tone dyes when fasting. The courtesans in Trastevere favor bold reds laced with cinnamon. The patrician wives cluster in softer pastels, modest, but rich. Even the gladiators are getting in on it. Yes, gladiators. You spot one in the forum, tall, scarred, draped in a simple tunic with hair that glints with subtle copper under the sun. Not accidental. And certainly not practical in the arena. This is branding. This is iconography. This is the evolution of the Roman hair code. At home, you begin sketching. Not art, mapping. A spectrum of color associations. Dye as dialect. Hue as hierarchy. It's messy, subjective, and constantly changing. But you're starting to see patterns no one else has noticed. Your cousin peers over your shoulder. You're trying to translate hair? You nod. Why not? It's already talking. She picks up your strand of test locks, strokes the ends. Then what does this one say? You pause. It says, "Don't underestimate me just because I rinse with lavender." She grins. I like her. So do you. You hang the strand above your door. Tomorrow, you'll try a mix with crushed figs and sage ash, and experiment in subtlety. But tonight, you sit with your notes, your herbs, and your quietly whispering strands. Because in this city of columns and chaos, sometimes the loudest thing you can do is shine exactly how you choose. The walls of the bathhouse are echoing with laughter, steam, and the splash of shallow pools. You settle into the tepidarium, shoulders sinking into the warm water as the chaos of the city melts from your spine. Your hair, freshly rinsed with olive blossom and lemon peel, floats lightly on the surface, glinting like a polished coin beneath torchlight. You're not alone. Across the pool, two women are discussing a name scratched into the plaster wall behind the benches, Calpurnia, Queen of Curls. You squint and smile. You've seen the name before, in other bathhouses, carved on columns, etched into pottery. Part graffiti, part tribute, part urban legend. Calpurnia, the woman whose hair reportedly shimmered with a natural gradient of 3 colors. No one's sure if she exists, or ever existed. But the stories? Oh, the stories are vivid. She used lemon water and violet dust, one woman claims. No, another corrects. She used octopus ink and starlight. Historians still argue whether figures like Calpurnia were real stylists, beautified legends, or just the ancient equivalent of marketing mascots. But whether real or imagined, her name has become shorthand for hair goals. You trail your fingers through the water, thinking about all the anonymous women whose experiments led to disasters, triumphs, or quiet innovations. How many dye recipes were scratched into bathhouse walls? How many color disasters were hidden under hastily arranged veils? You glance to your left and spot it, a scribble in fading charcoal just above the waterline. Fig bark turns copper in sun, 2 days max. A recipe, a warning, or a brag? Hard to tell. But it's real, raw, and very Roman. Later, in the changing room, you notice a wooden box tucked beneath the bench. Inside, broken combs, half-used dye packets, empty vials. A communal stash. You add a small sprig of your lavender blend and close the lid quietly. A gift for the next curious alchemist. You pass a mirror-polished urn on your way out and catch your reflection, glowing skin, flushed from heat, and hair that glows not just from color, but from intention. Outside, the streets hum. You follow a group of girls weaving flowers into each other's braids. One turns and offers you a sprig of rosemary. You accept. She nods approvingly at your hair. Looks like you've seen Calpurnia's ghost. You laugh. Maybe I've just learned to listen. You think about the graffiti, the scribbled formulas, the nicknames, the invented myths. How sometimes the most powerful expressions aren't found in temples or scrolls, but in the echoing baths and quiet corners of women trading knowledge one whisper at a time. Rome is full of declarations, but you've learned to pay attention to the softer ones. A curl that means morning. A streak that means hope. A color so specific it must be love. You tuck the rosemary into your belt and head home, the scent of citrus still clinging to your skin, your hair drying in loose waves that say nothing and everything all at once. You're standing in the outer corridors of the Colosseum, not for bloodshed or spectacle, but for something far more surprising, hair consultations. The crowd here isn't just tourists or toga-clad nobles. It's fans. Devotees. Groups of women, men, even children gathered in tight clusters, craning for a glimpse of the gladiators as they enter. And yes, cheering their hairstyles. Today's match features a particularly popular fighter known as Diodorus the Flame. He walks with the swagger of someone who knows the world is watching, and with hair streaked in bronze and crimson. A mohawk, of all things, dyed like a dying sunset. It's absurd. It's perfect. It draws screams from the stands louder than the trumpets. You nudge your cousin. When did gladiators become fashion icons? She grins. Since they realize survival sells, but style sells better. You nod slowly. It makes sense. These men, once viewed as disposable, have become symbols, brands. They fight, but they also perform. And hair is part of the act. Later, in the shade of a nearby archway, you overhear a heated discussion between two arena vendors. One is mixing a small bowl of charcoal and ochre. The other is arguing about adding egg yolk for shine. Diodorus never uses yolk, she insists. Makes the color too soft. Historians still debate how far gladiators went with personal grooming, especially since most were enslaved. But accounts from the time reference oils, scented powders, even pigments rubbed into the scalp before battle, part intimidation, part advertisement. And here they are now, signing tokens for children, their hair catching the sun, dripping sweat and symbolism in equal measure. You watch a boy with a tiny wooden sword beg his mother for Diodorus dye. She sighs. After you learn to read, the day ends with the roar of a crowd and a cloud of dust. Diodorus survives another match. His opponent isn't so lucky. But what people talk about afterward isn't the duel. It's the way his hair flared in the light, how it looked like fire when he raised his arms in victory. Back at home, you stare at your own scalp in the mirror. You don't fight lions. You don't carry a sword. But something about that bronze and red blend stays with you. So you try it. Just a streak at first. Then more. The effect is striking. Bold without being gaudy. Powerful without a shout. It reminds you that dye isn't always about beauty. Sometimes, it's about becoming someone new, someone braver. The next morning, a woman stops you at the market. Did you fight yesterday? You blink. What? She gestures to your hair. That's arena dye. You smile. No. But I survived my week. She laughs and nods like that's good enough. You walk on, the scent of eggs and ash still fainting your strands, and realize there are many ways to be seen. And many more ways to stand tall in a world that too often tries to shrink you. Even if all you wield is a comb and a bit of courage. It begins with a breeze. Light, playful, carrying the scent of crushed time and something metallic. You're outside your home, combing a fresh infusion of walnut and fig through your hair when you notice it. The shift. The edges of your strands, once a rich umber, are beginning to tint blue. You rush to the polished bronze mirror, turn your head. Yes, definitely a bluish gleam. At first, it's subtle, like storm clouds flirting with sunlight. But within hours, it deepens. By evening, your hair looks like it's been dipped in indigo ink. You're not alone. At the baths, a merchant is yelling about his beard turning green. At the bakery, two sisters giggle over their golden curls suddenly gone coppery pink. One claims she used the cheaper dye from the herbalist near the aqueducts. The other mutters, "Serves you right." It's chaos. Beautiful, colorful, unintended chaos. The culprit? An early shipment of almond oil from Mauritania, rich, yes, but reactive. When blended with sun-dried ash or certain vinegars, it triggers odd oxidations. No one tested it before slathering it onto their heads. Typical Rome. Historians still argue whether these color accidents were occasional flukes or common enough to require warning scrolls. You're guessing the latter. Romans didn't label their jars. They just hoped. You're not too bothered. The bluish tint suits you, actually. You call it midnight laurel when anyone asks. And you say it with such calm confidence that two women from the temple actually request the formula. Your cousin's mishap is worse. Her streaks turn to lurid chartreuse. She insists she loves it. It's theatrical, she says, flipping her hair like she's leading a Dionysian chorus. Soon, the markets catch on. Dye sellers begin rebranding their mistakes. A sign outside one shop reads, "Now offering Twilight Moss and Burnt Saturn. Get yours before it fades." You can't help but laugh. Rome never apologizes for chaos. It monetizes it. One vendor even invents a new method, deliberate aging. He sells dyes that change color over time. A bold burgundy that shifts into copper over 2 days, then settles into gold. He calls it the journey of a Roman soul. You try it, of course. The transition is mesmerizing. Each day, your hair tells a different story. Passion. Wisdom. Triumph. You catch your reflection in window glass and feel like a walking mosaic. And something else happens. People stop you to ask questions, not just about recipes, but about your life. Where did you get that color? Become shorthand for, what are you feeling these days? Is this one of the accident dyes? Means, are you okay? Your hair becomes both mirror and message board. One night, you see a young man staring at his reflection in the Tiber. His hair has turned silver blue, likely unintentionally. He frowns. You sit beside him. Looks good, you say gently. He shrugs. Was supposed to be brown. You nod. Brown's overrated. He laughs, surprised. Then thanks you. Because sometimes, what starts as an accident becomes identity. And in Rome, where nothing is constant but change, maybe a little surprise in your strands is the most honest reflection of all. The morning fog rolls in soft and silent, cloaking the rooftops in a thin veil like freshly spun wool. You step outside, your sandals brushing against dew-slicked stone, and feel the weight of quiet. Rome is still sleeping, for once. The world feels muted, but your hair does not. It's the final day of the lunar cycle, a moment the old women say is good for reflection, for trimming ends and letting go. You sit in the courtyard with a mirror balanced on your knees and a bowl of warm bay leaf oil beside you, fingers gently combing through the now gently faded streaks of your last dye. It's become a ritual, one that started with vanity and settled into something sacred. You tie a linen cloth around your shoulders, take the shears, and trim just a few strands. Not because they're split. Because you're ready. Because you know that hair, like all things, holds memory. And some memories need to fall away to make room for what's next. You rinse with water caught in an amphora 2 nights ago, when the moon was still full. As it drips down your neck, cold and fragrant, you smile at how far you've come, not just in pigments and formulas, but in presence. Historians still argue whether Romans dyed their hair more to fit in or stand out. The answer, of course, is both. Dye was a declaration and a disguise, a dare and a diary. It said, I am still changing. I am still choosing. You dry your hair slowly under the rising sun, letting it ripple and settle into its current self. Today, you don't reapply color. You let it breathe. Not because you've given up the ritual, but because sometimes, the boldest thing you can do, is wait. You step into the street. A girl nods at your hair, her own braided with streaks of marigold. A boy with a blush of berry red in his curls offers a shy smile. A street poet near the fountain yells a rhyme that ends with fuchsia like a goddess's sigh. It's subtle, but it's everywhere, color, carried in motion and glance. Not shouting, just shimmering. Back at home, you tidy your jars. You press a strand of your freshly cut hair into a wax tablet beside your earliest formulas. You label it simply, today. Then you lie back on your sleeping mat, rosemary still on your fingertips, and let your breathing slow. Rome hums outside your window, a mosaic of voices and feet and dreams. Somewhere, a new blend is bubbling over a brazier. Somewhere, a woman whispers a spell into a strand. You close your eyes. Let the dyes fade. Let the colors rest. Let the rhythm of change carry you gently now, into something softer. The fire in the hearth dims to embers, soft and pulsing like a heartbeat. Outside, the last sounds of the city have quieted. No more sandals scraping stone, no more carts rolling down uneven streets, no more market bartering echoing through alleyways. Just silence, and the slow breath of a world easing into sleep. You lie back, wrapped in linen, hair drying into soft, untamed waves that smell faintly of basil and ash. The ritual has ended for now. The pots are empty, the dyes are corked, the scalp is soothed. There is no need to choose a color tonight. You've worn them all, haven't you? Every hue has left its mark, bold streaks of change, gentle washes of memory, accidental blossoms of something unplanned but strangely perfect. And through it all, your hair has been more than hair. It's been your canvas. Your companion. Your quiet rebellion. Let it rest now. Let the night darken gently around you like dye in still water. In the morning, the sun will rise again over Rome, and someone, maybe you, will reach for a bowl of something fragrant and transformative. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll just let your hair fall as it is, uncolored but not unremarkable. Because you've learned, haven't you? The beauty was never just in the color. It was in the choosing. Now sleep. Let the last scent of bay leaf and lavender lull you. Let your scalp feel cool and clean. Let your body soften under the weight of quiet. And let your dreams be shaded in every color you've ever worn. Sweet dreams.